Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road toward the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and is Instagram actually good for anything? In the corner table by the fire are three people. One of them is shouting enthusiastically, yes, yes, Instagram is good for meeting awesome new people. And that is me, your co host, Mandy Hauk. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own story so that we can better understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. So, first, let me introduce we have a special guest co host tonight. We have Isaac Hands, photographer, friend of Anselm. How are you doing, Isaac?
I'm doing great. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Mr. Visual Artist, helping me talk to a visual artist. And speaking of visual artists, I met, quote unquote, whatever, however, virtually this next our guest tonight. I met him thanks to Instagram. He has a an Instagram account, Psalm Prayers, and I became addicted to it. And then I asked our producer to reach out and ask if we could talk to him. And I ended up finding out that he does a heck of a lot more than his Instagram would imply. So tonight we are welcoming Craig Yinkst. He is an artist, a painter. He actually does block prints. I'll let him explain that. He used to be an art teacher and he has been a full time artist since 2003. So, welcome, Craig.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So glad to have you here. So yeah, so I hope I didn't scare you with how much I was liking your posts and commenting on them.
Always nice to know that there's actually one or two people out there that like to work, you know?
Oh, actually, I absolutely love it. So, as you know, I placed an order and I got some of your stuff today, so
Yes.
I'm geeking out on
Thank you.
that. So I glossed over it. So if you could explain what is your primary medium that you work in?
Well, today it probably is block printing, woodcuts and linoleum cuts. And like you said, the block print is a term that's kind of an umbrella term like relief print, and it covers wood engraving, wood cut, linoleum cut, a vinyl cut, anything where you're carving out the plate and then the surface gets inked and printed, as opposed to an etching where it's the reverse. You're taking away a groove and you're pushing the ink down into that groove. So you have intaglio, which is that, and then you have relief prints, which I tend to use the term block print, but I could be more specific on certain pieces.
Okay, that's really interesting because I realized in my brain I was thinking what I had you doing was etching, so it's the
Ah,
opposite of that. So you carve away the negative space.
yes, yes,
Oh, that's really interesting. Well, Isaac is a photographer, so the negative space thing.
right.
um,
I took printmaking in college too. I sat in my dorm room and made lots of block prints.
Yeah, yeah.
oh, that's really cool. So Craig, you actually have like an antique, what you use is an antique printing press or something, right? I'm using the wrong term, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a proof press, and it was made in the 1930s. I've used etching presses. Each press you can use them, but they each have different qualities to them. The etching press it's a little tougher because the bed is actually moving. And I've used a couple different ones, and it always seems like you have to jam the block in there with the table at the same time before you run it. You can't really use like you would with an etching plate where you put in a blanket and it grabs the blanket first and then it eventually gets to the plate.
Oh.
But I've used etching. I've used a book press that you just kind of clamp down. um, a number of different ones, but the proof press is something that's type high, letterpress type high, and what that means is you have movable type that can
Okay.
be placed in there. So letterpress is usually made for signs. Why I like it is the roller moves and the bed stays stationary, and it just your block is not going to move when you're making the print.
So
So
that sounds like you'd have less risk of smearing or
yeah, to some degree.
okay.
To some
So what
degree.
did you do, Isaac, when you were in college? Is that what you did?
Yeah, we had a similar setup. I just took 1 semester, so we did 1 etching and then a few block prints,
Hmm.
and pushed it through that way.
See, that's why I invited you. So there you go. Thank you for proving why you're here. So I noticed that you have a degree in art, but then you have a master's in painting, but then you taught yourself printmaking. How did you go about teaching yourself?
I I did, and to my chagrin, I didn't take any printmaking courses in, in my undergrad. I finally took one when I got out of college, but that that was, uh, not beneficial for me. And so eventually I got into it just because of the artists that I saw doing the work. I've always been interested in narrative work, so storytelling type things. So I've connected with medieval artists, I've connected with the magic realists, anything that kind of told a story in a piece, in a composition. And
Right.
I came across a couple artists when I was at the library one day that, well, the first one was Lind Ward, a guy by the name of Lind Ward, who worked in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. And Ward had a book called Storyteller Without Words. And the title intrigued me because of the storytelling nature of art. And when I
Right.
looked at it, he was doing woodcut engravings, entire stories, but without words. So he was using sequential images to tell these stories. And so he was kind of the precursor to the graphic novel, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Another artist, Franz Masriel, was doing the same thing, and he actually influenced Ward. But those two were the main key people in the genre, and I was just kind of taken by the whole graphic black white, and I think that's when I started giving my hand. I was more interested, I think, in the whole storytelling, but to some degree in the block print too, and the
Right.
fact that you could, I was starting to collect their original works. I was seeking other artists that actually made woodcut novels, which was very slim. A lot of these guys, Lawrence Hyde and Giacomo Patri, they would do a book, but they'd do one book and you would never see them again. And I can understand there's so much work involved. And so I actually tried to do one called The Magician that I never published. And I got about 30, maybe 35 images into it. But I mean, Ward did a book that was probably 200 images,
Oh
and
my God.
he was just a madman at working. I mean, he was doing these wood engravings, and each one could literally be a piece on the wall. They were that good. It's not just a filler type of thing that you see in comics. And each one had to be carved, and the same time he's illustrating books like Frankenstein and some of these other things. But um, that I guess that was the start for me delving into
Yeah.
printmaking. Yeah.
Well, I actually saw so I saw The Magician. I'm trying to think of where I saw it
Oh,
when I was
you
looking
might
you
have
up.
seen it on my Facebook page if you dug down deep enough.
I did. I'm a researcher.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Frankenstein because you have a
Oh,
children's book. Is that available that it's based sort of loosely on Frankenstein?
Dr. Baconstein.
Right.
Dr. Baconstein. Yeah, children's book, and that was done with pen and ink, and that was done when my kids were little. Um, and it's just a kind of a fun thing where it's interactive. You can reach in and feel certain thing like the noodles and olives for the eyes, and so, you know, you're supposed to try to guess what Frankenstein or Baconstein is made up of.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Okay, that's
yeah.
fun. So that those were early on, but since then
Yes.
you've made the books that I bought you have I'm very excited about this. It came just in time for Easter.
Uh-huh.
Um for the Way of the Cross, which is the Stations of the Cross in woodcuts. So I'm very excited to do that.
Mhm.
Um and then um I I should have just bought all your books at once because I also want all the Psalms. You did a
Yeah.
project. Now you mentioned that what you were attracted to is the story, and I kind of see that, and it seems like the projects you choose come from like you don't just do one um image at a time necessarily. It seems like you get drawn to a concept or a narrative sort of. So like you wanted to do all of the Psalms. So you did a wood
Yeah.
press mm, a block print. My brain
Mhm.
died. A block
Yep.
print for each of the Psalms,
I
right?
did. I did. Uh, and that again was, I don't know, I just get it in my head that, "Oh, this would be kind of an interesting project." And the reason I was interested in that is because as I started digging into history, the history of a print, it's you would find artists in that 16th century when Gutenberg had started bringing out the press. You know, the
Mhm.
press was invented, and so all these artists kind of jumped on this new technology, and they were making, you know, things like the Passion, um, different narratives, but I was not finding anybody that had really done the Psalms, at least not, you know, not an entire thing. But you would find that
Mhm.
they really centered on certain biblical concepts, and many artists would do the same thing, but not the Psalms.
Mhm.
And so that kind of intrigued me. I went searching for it, and I never really did find somebody that did it. So I thought, well, I might as well give it a shot. And and so I did, but I it was one of those things where I thought I was just gonna knock this thing out in a year, and as I got into it, I realized, like, this thing was much too big for me to just knock out. So even the book itself is over the course of, I'd say, 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years. So you're even seeing a kind of a mix of my work and different influences, and there's probably not so much consistency in it, but to some degree, it makes it interesting, and it allows the viewer to see my path in that. Um, I think what was interesting about the whole, um aspect of doing the Psalms was that it was the journey was more important than the finished end.
Mm.
And so, it was kind of like being the, you know, the desert fathers and the desert mothers, they would be around the abbot in the morning, and they would just get a snippet. They'd read it to them because they couldn't read, and they would get a
Oh,
snippet,
right.
and then they'd take that with them through the day. And so that's what it kind of became, more of a devotional for me.
Mhm.
And I still read the Psalms, like different versions every year. I'll read a different version, and then you'll get a just something that really speaks to you for that day.
Right.
And then I would carry it with me, and if a visual came, great. If it didn't, I'd stay with that until something did. But that was the whole experience with my Psalms.
Yeah. I didn't
Uh,
realize it took you 6 to 8 years, but that makes sense since there are 150.
That's the
yeah,
part of
yeah,
the artist life that I'm always interested in is the research and everything that goes, you know, behind it that people don't see. You
mm,
know, a lot of people think of, you know, the artist being there with his paintbrush all the time, and there's so much, you know, reading and contemplating and research that goes into all um the work. I was kind of wondering, like, when you're choosing the works that you're going to do, how much research do you go? I mean, obviously you would do a lot of research into the Psalms, but a lot of your work also has features these musicians and past saints. Like, how much research do you do on these people as you're like making work about them, and like how do you
yep.
choose these people?
Yeah, the research is very important for me, and I think a very important part of the project. And um, I think, if there's a theme and I'm pushing toward that theme, then eventually I'm going to come across people that are new to me or different concepts that are new to me. And then if it intrigues me enough, I'll pursue it. Um, so, with whether it's the musicians and a lot of this, it's just because I'm ignorant, It's like I'm not the knowledgeable person in this, it's the journey for me. I'm digging in, and as I
Mhm.
discover things, it becomes part of my work, and then I share that, and other people are exposed to that. So, um, but definitely the research is important, and in some aspects, I'll just skim the surface, and if somebody really intrigues me, I'll dig a lot deeper. But I mean, I have a whole library of books, too many some that I've never even hardly gotten to, but, uh, and yourself too, Isaac, on the research part, you
Yeah,
enjoy
for
that
sure.
part?
I think that's the part that I like the best, the part that most people don't see. Like I like making the work, obviously, but
Mhm.
I feel literature is a big one for me. Like reading fiction is huge for me.
Mm.
Doing research, and I do a lot of work on the road, so researching the places that I'm going, knowing the
Yeah,
history where I'm shooting is super important.
yeah,
Well, I was actually thinking, part of the reason I invited you, Isaac, is because I was so taken by Craig's um, distilling each psalm into one image. That made me think of your photography because you have to choose like what image, this one image has to tell the heart of the story that I'm trying to share.
Yeah,
Um,
I think
and
as a photographer, sometimes I'm always amazed by artists who paint and do like prints like this that create from nothing because I'm taking photos of things that are already there. Like that's I'm not the kind of photographer that makes necessarily the image. I find the image. Um, so like I take a bunch of photos and then I edit later. It makes me curious for you, Craig, like how many iterations of each design, each block do you end up doing when you're going through your process?
yeah, that really just depends on the piece. Typically, it's done in the drawing stage, and sometimes I'll just have it right on, and then other times I feel like I'm a beginner and just, wrestling with this thing. And the last group of things that I was doing, typically I'll form the whole thing in my head. And that's the difference too between, say, when I paint and when I do the block print, because the block print you got to be right on. The painting you can continue to add to, the block print you're taking away.
mm,
The painting, you're working more with color. The block print, I tend to be working more with positive, negative space. And so it's two different ball games that are going on with those. Um, but I think, most of it, the stage is done in my head or the drawing. And then by the time I get to the block, the only decisions I'm doing at that stage is how am I going to carve this? Am I gonna do shadow? Am I gonna do positive, negative? Am I gonna do hatching, cross hatching? Am I gonna do texture? Am I gonna do pattern? Since there's so many different ways to actually carve a piece, you're kind of at that dilemma. What's gonna work best for this? Um, Let me go back real quick to I'm working on a Celtic series, which I like quite a bit.
oh,
And, I was going to Ireland. I finally got there 2 years ago, but it started in 2020 and that the bottom fell out. We didn't make the trip, but I'd already started doing all the research on all these Celtic saints. So that was that beginning stage of doing their stories. And what I like about the Celtic saints is that imagination. There's part fact, there's part nonfiction. There's this fanciful aspect to their stories, and that just feeds the imagination, and I've kind of stayed with that series. I'm hoping to get back to Scotland sometime soon. And it's a series that I've got plenty of drawings for. I just haven't actually had the time to carve every one of them. And
right.
so that's a growing series.
Well, and I should say, I mean, I hope listeners have been, listening and then also using their thumbs to find you online because the thing I haven't mentioned, but I should if they're not already looking at your work, is most of your work, I hope I don't know if that's true most. I think most of your work also has words. So like you have Gerard Manley Hopkins and you have a quote from Pied Beauty is part of the work. Um and that is really obviously I'm the writer in the group here. And so I think that's partly what has drawn me to your work is the way that you have taken the words that in some cases are so familiar and then you have but then you've made this beautiful primitive like um I don't know how to describe your art. It's just it's amazing to me that you can get the amount of detail and emotion that you do out of carved lines because you are the medium is limited. Is that fair to say?
Could say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, you don't have as many things that you could do with paint.
right, right.
Yeah.
But then just the shapes of like the eyes give you an expression to the eye. I actually I'm gonna quote you back to you because I read
Ah,
this quote when I was my husband's been laughing at me because I have cried more preparing for this podcast because
wow.
I just get so moved. I mean, I am a crier, but I'm still
Oh,
I
darn it.
just there's something I just really feel like you came into my orbit at exactly the right time because whew, anyway, so I saw this quote. I think it was another article or interview with you. And you said, with the block print and with linoleum or woodcuts, you have that black square. And every time I make a mark, every time I make a gouge, I'm carving light out of darkness. And I just absolutely loved what do you I don't know if you can expand on that. It says so much as it is, but I just loved that you said that.
Yeah, that and I'll tie that into, the Light from Darkness book. That was all inspired by the Sandy Hook school shootings, and
Right.
to be honest, that's when I first started doing icons. Um, it was in the aftermath. So it devastated me. I have 2 daughters, and they were very young at the time, and I had a real difficult time putting myself in the place of those parents, and then also trying to relive any of that scene, and
Mhm.
so I thought, "Well, what can I do from this situation?" And what I chose to do was a New Year's resolution the following year where I would carve 1 prayer per week that dealt with light coming out of a dark situation, and so I was actually looking for quotes more than people, um,
Oh,
and
okay.
prayers. Each one was a prayer, and so one person would lead me to another person, you got Saint Francis in there, and you got Hopkins and a number of different people throughout, 52 in all, and I actually stayed with it and finished that one in a year. And I liked the idea that this prayer could live on, like their words could live on. And what I wanted to do too, then with the proceeds, not that it was any blockbuster seller, but that book has continued to support orphanages ever since that day it was released. And so it's like, this is what I'm going to do out of this darkness because I never would have done this had this not happened. It's like, I'm not going to have darkness have the final say. And what I did like too about that is you're carving every mark that you make is light, and every mark that's being made is prayer, and these prayers live on, and then so the person that gets the book reads it, speaks it, prays it, and the person that first uttered those words, they're they're still living on. It's ripples in a pond. They're still making, an impact in the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so I just like that aspect of light having the final word in
Mm,
something like that. But that's where that quote kind of came out of. Um,
yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, to bring it back to Isaac, I mean, light, that
Mhm.
photography,
Oh, yeah.
I said a sentence fragment. You go ahead. Cut out.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying, and I agree. Like, as a photographer, working with light is my main thing, and I love using it to glorify God and uh, tell the stories that I want to tell. I think that's
Mhm.
I really like what you said, like that quote that Mandy brought up. I love that quote as well.
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, and
mm,
even in writing, that's what I'm trying to do. Like, I remember the first book I wrote, which was a miserable failure. I really, it's bad. But
That wasn't the title, was it?
no, I could retitle it that though, because it would be appropriate. No, I liked my characters so much that um, I didn't really show them for who they were. So really nothing really happened. And so as I've learned to write, really you have to show the darkness in the world and in the people in order to show the contrast. That's how you get story. That's what story
Mm,
is that change and the light breaking in particular if
mm,
you're um wanting to write something that has some sort of hope.
yeah,
It can't all be hope because hope implies you're starting from a not good place.
yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, it's interesting how um art in all its different forms kind of has the same goal. It's that it's to look up and to look forward and to look through. Yeah. So on that note, I really get a deep sense of vulnerability in your work, especially from the book you just talked about, The Light in the Darkness. Wait, Light Out of Darkness, pardon me. Because you literally those were your prayers. So it really feels like, I know every artist to a certain extent puts themselves on the page or the canvas or the block. Um, but that just really struck me that you were putting your personal prayers that were really from a place of grief.
Well,
Out.
these were prayers that I collected, in that
Oh,
book.
okay.
These were
Okay.
different people's prayers. So I was just on a trek to find their words. So I'm using their words and then bringing their image and then just whatever little snippet I could put in the icon I did. But
Okay.
yeah.
You did say that, but I was stuck on my old thought, and so
That's all right.
anyway. But still, I really think, I mean, those things resonated with you. That just makes me think of, like, the Book of Common Prayer.
Yeah.
So as you were making them, I imagine you were praying the prayers as you
Yeah, you're living yeah, you're living with it. And you're also like, Isaac had said on the research, you're digging. So you are coming across a lot of different things on that before you have to make a decision. I got a week to get this done and I want to
Right.
stay true to that. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you're digging through and you're reading. And that's why I think for me, this form of art is very meditative.
Mm.
It
mhm.
slows me down. It it allows me to think. I'm not a speed racer going through this. I'm not an action painter. I'm one mark to my, people want to watch me work. I said, do you want to watch grass grow or, do you enjoy that too? It just, it's like nothing's being, you could sit there and watch me. Hey, nothing's being done here. It's like, yes, look, I carved that away. But it slows you down so much that you have to focus on what's being said, who you're doing. Um, you've kind of researched this person, their life, what they offer me, and then in inevitably what they're going to offer somebody else too. Um,
Yeah. I like that. So it's like you're a conduit because you're taking what was meaningful to you, and then you're yeah, it's
Yeah.
that whole sub-creation thing like Dorothy Sayers talks about. Like God creates and then we take his creation and then he uses us to um make something new. Not
Yeah.
completely because but it's
Right.
still meaningful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to
Um
resonate with somebody someplace, somewhere.
yeah.
Like you said, I mean, some of the stuff resonates with you for whatever reason I don't know. If I'm reading a book or whatever, something might really resonate with me, or see a photograph and not resonate with the person next to me. You bring
Mhm.
all of this baggage and everything else to the table, and then it filters through you. And I'm an art show artist, so I do art fairs. I've done that for a number of years. I got one coming up in Fort Worth, and it's an interesting thing because I'll see people walk into the booth and you kind of read them, and some just boom, nothing, and others there's a connection there, and
Mhm.
I've seen people move to tears. I've seen them move to laughter. They've
Mhm.
told me stories. They've unloaded as if I'm the psychiatrist there, and and it's just, but something there connects to some degree that doesn't connect with others. And I've come to see that, and you said, about being vulnerable. I mean, you to some degree, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve. Um,
Mhm.
uh, the one of that you saw there of Van Gogh, that was a piece done for Vigilantes of Love. They're re-releasing an album called Blister Soul, and Bill Maloney wrote the song Skin, and Skin is about Vincent Van Gogh. And one of the lines is, "Sew your heart onto your sleeve and wait for the axe to fall." And I
Ugh,
think I think any artist that's kind of been out there for any length of time has bumped into this. I
mhm.
mean, you've put it out there and you've been rejected, or you've been made to feel bad about what you've done.
Yeah.
And if you've gone through the church like Vincent, there's a good chance that the church has harmed you in some way, shape, or form. I know that's true for me. I would assume it's true for anybody that's tried to get their work through that door.
Yeah.
Which is
Mhm.
really interesting because Instagram was for me a way to move around that, and in the process, churches started coming to me, which was,
Yeah.
the ones I was trying to get into, they didn't want any part of me, but then all of a sudden these other, institutions were really interested in the work. But I would assume you've had similar experiences with any of
Mhm.
that, just pouring yourself out and being vulnerable.
Yeah,
And that's
I got 8 rejections this week on my novel, so
There you go. All
it was a great week.
right.
Great
Hey,
week for
I
Mandy.
feel good about
so many
this.
rejections. Yeah.
Add
I
to the pile, right?
Yeah.
I actually I've started calling them rave rejections because my agent doesn't let me see all of them, but,
Yeah.
so but, um, the ones I've seen, they'll be complimentary, but it's always I mean, I literally
Yeah.
had one editor a few months ago rejected it because it was, not no, it was too commercial. And then recently I got an editor who rejected it because it wasn't commercial enough. So
Right.
you really just have to, like you said, I'm sure when you're standing there watching people react to your art, it's so strange to have this thing that has come out of you. So it's part of you. And then to watch people react that, because like you said, they bring their own stuff. Yeah.
It
Right.
it takes another level of vulnerability to sit there and then be open to talking to them about,
Yeah.
like, being that conduit, being that, intermediate person of, being willing to share your experience and listen to them share their experience. That's a whole different level of vulnerability than just putting yourself on the page or
Yeah,
the
why do we do this, you guys? No.
We enjoy pain and
yeah,
suffering. We want to get closer
Apparently.
to Christ.
yeah.
Yeah.
making beauty out of the pain and suffering.
It's
Oh,
true.
yes.
Yeah, hey, light out of darkness. So,
Right, right.
um, yeah, and, Isaac, what's your experience been like with that? The rejection and the hills to climb?
I recently finished school, finished my master's program, and so I have not yet fully waded into like the I just sent out a bunch of applications for different grants and contests like the last month. And so I'm waiting for the rejection letters right now.
Okay.
Hopefully they don't even come, but they're going to. They
We're
always do.
here for you
And
if they
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
So, uh, so do you have a favorite project? You do so many, like I said, I found you through Psalm Prayers on Instagram, so it was all the sacred art that I knew about, and then when I started looking more, you have all of this awesome Bob Dylan stuff and Johnny Cash, and you have wonderful musician work. But they all have the lyrics, and so once again, I see that like your heart in each piece that you do, because it's not just a portrait of their face. It seems like you're really trying to capture something of who they are by putting their lyrics on there too. So do you have a favorite or project or piece?
I don't per se. I guess it's always what you're working on recently. Um, the music was early on. I don't do as many music pieces now as I used to. A lot of that was the blues. That was my initial impetus to do the music series was digging into the lives of blues musicians. And
Hmm.
those stories are fantastical. You know,
Yeah.
some of those stories are just amazing, and then you're trying to capture it in a piece, a single piece like you actually could. And then also the lyrics too are quite wonderful, and I think they capture a lot of those people. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not a wordless woodcut novel guy. I like using the words, and I think as I was exposed more and more to printmaking and seeing like the Mexican printmakers and those that were using it for poster art, those appealed to me. I like lettering even for the shape,
Mhm.
even for the visual, let alone that it brings
Yeah.
another message to the table. So I do like that,
Hmm.
and I do like the filtering the spiritual even through my blues musicians, rock musicians, you name it. I think God's
Hmm.
speaking through everybody at all different times if you dig. I don't like this kind of secular sacred, even though sometimes I'll use that
Right.
terminology for people's benefits. I look at all of my work on that same even keel, not like, oh, this is more holy and this is, this is a bunch of junk. All that body of work I find interesting. And yeah, I'd done a body of work and just one away, and that was on the monastic hours of prayer, the daily office, which was kind of the 7 hours of prayer, which I enjoyed that series. I have one left to go, and I think why I like it is I'm able to work on a little bit bigger of a piece. So 12 by 18 as opposed to the
Okay.
6 by 4. And it just allows more, composition to deal with something in the composition. Um, so yeah, the larger works, I guess, to some degree, but not
Yeah.
Do you
too
have
large.
a project?
What, Isaac?
Do you have a project that you feel like you've wrestled more with? I feel like as artists, sometimes we have those that come naturally and those that take a bit more like wrestling, almost like wrestling with the Lord, like you're wrestling with this artwork. Is there any of those that like you've put out that you feel good about that you've wrestled with?
Yeah. Any that put your hip out,
Uh,
like
I
Jacob?
I did
Sorry.
I did one large music piece that was 5 by 3 feet, and it became just my daily job to go in the studio and knock off about that much of it. And, you're using a gouge that's, well, here's the gouge, to knock out this 5 by 3 foot piece. I wasn't using larger chisel sizes, so it's very detailed. And, I'm midway through, I
Mm.
thought, what in the world am I doing? It just seemed like such a good idea when I started, but you're halfway through, you're not going to stop now. Um, but that was
Yeah.
that was something that was tough. Even the printing process of that. I don't have a press, so I had to hand burnish it. And it took me 3 hours just to hand burnish the
Oh,
thing. And you're using a piece of
Oh,
paper that's
wow.
just wide enough and you're rolling it out, and the paper itself is 70 bucks or whatever, so you're thinking, "Please don't go a little left or a little right," you're just rolling that thing out, but that there's an example of something. I've done some pieces recently where I went into the piece, but this is on the drawing stage where I had a totally different concept in my head, and I'm trying to draw it, and it's just looking awful. And I'm erasing, I'm adding, I'm erasing, and I'm adding, I'm erasing, and eventually it becomes something totally different than I never even expected. I like think, well, that was the spirit at work here, but
Yeah.
usually it's all figured out here. And when I go to art shows, I'm driving on the road for 10 hours, 8, 10 hours. So I'm composing in my brain as I'm driving a lot of times. How about yourself, Isaac?
Yeah.
Isaac, do you have different ideas that you have felt like you've wrestled with?
yeah. I mean, I've had two main projects that I've worked on, and one was like my main thesis for my graduate program, and it took the whole program 3 years to like wrestling to figure out what it is. I feel like as a photographer, I work backwards from like a lot of other like painters and sculptors, like
Mm.
where I'm out shooting and I sometimes don't know what I'm like. I feel called to take this photo. I'm led to take this photo, but I'm not sure entirely what it means yet until I get all the images in the project done. Um, and there like this main project, man, it was just I was out in the middle of like cornfields in Kansas, and I was like, what am I doing? What? Why am I out here? What's going on? And it all came together in the end.
Yeah.
And then there's been other ones that like just felt like an outpouring of like I needed to create, and it came so naturally. But yeah, those ones that you wrestle with, I feel like are sometimes more rewarding because you feel like you really worked for it. You like put the blood, sweat, and tears into it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes when you have the cognitive dissonance, it's because something really important
You got to push through
is
that.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Mandy,
comfortable.
how about your struggles, Mandy?
Oh, yeah, I've had a few. So,
Yeah.
I typically will have an idea, and then I don't outline. We have a little friendly sort of debate between one of the other co-hosts and me about whether we outline our novels or not, and when I outline them, I lose interest, so I kinda have to go in there not knowing what I'm doing, and typically, I'll have some idea of what I wanna do, and it almost never ends up being that. So, I have no idea how I would handle, like, the kind of work that you do with the wood block because I would yeah, it never ends up being it always changes as I'm going,
Mhm.
as I'm writing. It's like it's sort of I'm I hesitate to compare myself to Charles Dickens because but he always would talk about I don't mean in the way I write, but
That's
he would
alright.
I relate very much to him and how he would talk about being, like, crowded, by his characters, like,
Yeah, yeah.
crowding around him, telling him to write their story. So, typically, that's what will happen to me, like, I have one scene in, one of my books that I my husband came in the room and I said, "This little girl just walked up to them. I don't know who she is." And she ended up becoming a main character. So, you
Huh.
know, that's it's kind of you just got to go with it.
Mandy
Yeah,
is known
yeah.
for being character forward, and I've heard rumors of some like crime scene esque like areas in her house of her setting up a like
Ah,
Oh,
we like the red tape and like all these
yeah.
different
no.
like mappings out of her characters on the wall.
that on the wall behind me, the viewers can't see it, but I'm pointing to it. That is a little string of little those are my characters on the wall up there.
Ah,
So, yeah, most
that's
of them are John Singer Sargent paintings. So
okay.
those are my portraits.
They live
Yes.
with you.
It used to
Yes.
have more strings, but I wrapped up a couple novels and I took them down.
Good.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Little do you know, I'm actually committing crimes out there. No, I'm
Oh
just kidding.
gosh.
Um, so Craig, so I know you taught art for several years, so I was just wondering because we're running out of time, which I hate that.
Yep.
But do you have any advice for artists, young artists, young in age or in? I mean, Grandma Moses was a young artist when she was like 80. So,
Yeah, my advice for young artists is be curious, be very, very curious, explore, dig, and experiment. And don't feel the need to
Mhm.
get pushed into a niche way too soon. Um, I think for me, one thing that I'm not as good at as I used to be was really digging for and looking through other artwork and looking at other artists. And there's just so many amazing artists out there. And now you can access it on the internet if you really want to dig. But I think, early on, that was very important for me. And I'll still come across artists that will just blow me away. Um, but
mhm.
I think, I think for a young artist, being curious and then also asking the question is, why? Why am I relating to this? Or why do I like
Mm.
black and white or strong contrast? Why did I like strong contrast? And I can't always answer those questions, but sometimes I think back and it's like, well, my grandfather was like a semi-pro magician, and there
Oh,
was that
cool.
mystery or mystical element. And I remember him giving me a catalog of magic tricks, and I would just lay in bed and look at these, and I realized they were all pen and ink, but they had that black and white strong graphic. And I've actually
Mm.
done a whole series of magic tricks. I did a whole magic series and a sideshow and circus series. Um, but that was the same for me. It's like, why don't I say connect as much as with a Monet, although I do like Monet, um, as opposed to a Lynn Ward,
Okay.
who did the woodcut novels. Why? And so I think you can start honing in on your interest as a young artist and then begin to pursue those. And eventually your own voice starts coming through. Early on you might start looking like other artists. And then
Hmm.
eventually as you continue to refine that over and over and over again, it's your work that's being revealed. Yeah,
I
kinda
love that.
carving away that Michelangelo carving away that rock that just keeps there's a form in there, I just gotta get
Yeah.
rid of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Isaac, did you have anything else you wanted to ask or?
I'm always, like, curious about I could ask 1,000 questions about process and materials and all those
Yeah.
the one that sticks out to me most is when you're choosing, um, like a wood block or linoleum or, like, does the materials of the prints matter to you at all as you're, like, making those decisions? Does that, like, speak into the work at all?
What material to use? Is
Yeah,
that
like,
what you're
when
saying?
yeah, how do
Uh,
you decide what material like, what kind of block you're gonna carve into?
Whatever's at hand. No, no, no. Yeah, sometimes if I typically will go more linoleum, um, but if there's something that I think will work better with wood, that roughness or wanting to use the wood grain, then I'll go ahead and
Mhm.
and do a wood cut. Yeah.
Well, I should say before I do have to say that I noticed in your Psalms, poems, and prayers, your block book of praise, there is actually Saint Anselm in there.
I
So I
That's awesome.
had to throw that out there for the listeners. So
I
yay.
have a drawing that's never gotten quite done yet.
Oh,
There he is.
there he is. Oh my gosh.
So maybe
That's fantastic.
one day if I ever get to carving this thing, we'll get him done.
Yeah.
I'll have to get it and hang it.
Yes,
There you
definitely.
go.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Isaac, for joining me in talking to Craig. We just really appreciate your time. And
Thank
I
you for
have to order
having
the
me.
rest of your books now because I don't know why I
Uh,
didn't order all of them. Well, as you can tell, things are winding down here at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you have polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have a minute, we would love for you to rate and review the show on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, look up Craig and buy his stuff. Thank you so much for listening. We will catch you next time.